Good morning, it's Jeremy. It's Wednesday, January the 25th, and I'm just looking at using the PlutoSDR as a whisper beacon. So my setup is, there's my PlutoSDR, and I'm taking the output of the PlutoSDR. I did some power measurement tests in the spectrum analyzer, but right now I'm taking the output, feeding it into a 20 dB pad, into an RTL-SDR. So right now we're looking at the screen here. We're receiving the whisper transmission on 2 meters, 144.489 megahertz, and I'm receiving on the RTL. Now the RTL is connected to a virtual machine, Ubuntu 2204, and the audio, I'm using GNURadio as a receiver, and the receiver output audio is fed by virtual cable into WSJT whisper on the receive end. On the transmit end, let's just go over to the transmit end. I'm using Windows. So there's my setup there. I've got GNURadio with a USB modulator, and I've got my audio coming from Whisper, the Whisper transmitter on the Windows side. It's going in there into a virtual cable, and that goes into a USB Hilbert transform transmodulator into the PlutoSDR sync. So that's the transmit end, and there's the WSJT-X whisper on the transmit end transmitting. So one thing I've noticed with the PlutoSDR is you've got to adjust the PPM. The frequencies can be off a little bit, so the frequency stability you've got to be careful of. This is just a demonstration to see if it'll work. The power of the Pluto, I'm getting about 0 dBm at 2 meters. You can actually get the Pluto to work down at 6 meters at 50 megs with a reduced power. I think it's around minus 8 dBm, whereas at 2 meters it's about 0 dBm. I did a similar thing for the Hack RF. My Hack RF can only produce about minus 20 dBm, although I think the final amplifier is gone. So that's pretty good. I mean, with the Pluto, you can cover the other bands. The Hack RF you can use for the HF bands, and the Pluto, you can start at 6 meters and go all the way up to 70 centimeters and 23 centimeters. The Pluto also has a receiver. I haven't tried that yet, using it in transceive mode, so you could use it as a transmit and a receiver for whisper. The reason I didn't do that on Windows is I only have one virtual audio cable, so you'd need 2 virtual audio cables to get the audio into GNURadio, and you'd also need it to get it out of GNURadio synchronously into the receiver. So that'll be my next project. Okay, so we're in Ubuntu 22.04, and I'm using GNURX right now to receive the whisper tone. So there's my carrier frequency for 2 meters, 144.489. And there's my whisper USB tone being received there. Let's look at the transmit end. So there's the transmit end. Whisper, the WSJT whisper produces a tone which goes into VB audio cable, which feeds my audio source in GNURadio. And this is my USB modulator using the Hilbert transform, the 90-degree phase shift. And that's my Pluto sync for the Pluto SDR. I've got the Pluto connected back-to-back with the RTL. So I've got all the gains at fairly low values because I've got a 20 dB attenuator in the path. I don't want to blow up my RTL. So that's what's going on there. There's WSJT. I'm transmitting whisper there. This is in the Windows desktop, and then in the Ubuntu desktop, I'm receiving on GNURX. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over and enable the WSJT-X in Ubuntu, and we'll receive our whisper transmission there. Although I have receive on the Pluto, I've only got one VB audio cable, so I can't get it into and out of the WSJT on Windows, so I have to. Okay, so we started transmitting again, and we've zeroed in our receiver. There it is there, it's in the right spot. So we should get a decode now. Incidentally, we're not hearing anything because I did a sort of a VB cable type of thing in Ubuntu, I use sudo mod probe send a loop, which just loops back the audio, so you don't hear the audio coming out of GNURadio. It's looped into WSJT-X here. Okay, so there we got a decode. There's my call the E3PKC, so it's working. So what we've done then is we've connected Whisper to the PlutoSDR on the transmit end on Windows. I use GNURadio to create a new USB modulator. The audio from the Whisper feeds VB cable, which feeds the audio into GNURadio. Then it goes into the PlutoSDR. I've got a 20 dB pad. I connect the output of the SDR, the PlutoSDR, into my RTL. And then I go into Ubuntu. The RTL is connected in Ubuntu to GNURX. And I use a similar digital audio cable from GNURX into WSJT Whisper on the receive end in Ubuntu.